Hello, everyone. So, this is a short series about open individualism, which is a fascinating topic, and I think it has actually become much more popular recently as the idea and the arguments have become more widely shared online. Now, what is open individualism? Open individualism is the idea that we are all one consciousness, and of course this is not a novel idea. It's ancient. It's traditionally associated with Hinduism as well as other religions that basically might say something like, deep down, we are all God, or we are all Krishna or Shiva, Vishnu, Brahma or Brahman. It doesn't matter. Ultimately, a lot of currents and ancient texts say that this is perhaps maybe the highest truth out there. But, they are not alone when it comes to this belief. And a whole lot of people have actually kind of rediscovered it throughout history, more or less independently. It's quite fascinating. And I would, for instance, drop the names of people like Schopenhauer or even Einstein and Schrödinger and Freeman Dyson. There's a lot of like pretty famous philosophers and physicists who have actually arrived at this view in a more or less independent fashion. And I think that's really interesting and really important to consider that this is not only a religious belief in and of itself, but also that there might be good actual arguments for it. And I think like that's a super important distinction to make, that in a sense you have two general approaches to this particular belief. You have on the one hand kind of an experiential based approach where, for example, you meditate a lot, you take psychedelics, or you do a lot of contemplation and yoga and all sorts of interesting, energy raising activities. And then all of a sudden you have the felt sense of a direct experience of these being the case. On the other hand, you have much more, in a sense, pedestrian approaches to these, which is actually how I personally arrived at this idea, which is you actually just, start out with some basic assumptions and work through their implications and see where they take you. And it's quite extraordinary that you can actually justify in a very philosophically rigorous way this idea that perhaps we are all one consciousness. And it's not only a matter of faith or a matter of belief, but also a matter of, philosophical, logical, scientific consistency. And I think that's pretty important because honestly, I find much more valuable to consider logical arguments that, in a sense, like make the worldview consistent with our modern understanding of physics and our understanding of, everything else from like logic to mathematics to biology. That arrive at open individualism as opposed to just having to, in a sense, believe in the content of one's, disclosed experience, which, as we will cover in a couple of videos, can often deceive you in all sorts of, interesting ways. And, there's some aspects of experience that are absolutely true, like qualia, the fact that you can experience phenomenal colors and textures and sounds, and that's a self-disclosing property of experience. But then there's the intentional content, what the experience is about. And that one is a little bit harder to actually, trust fully, because there's so many cases where actually the intentional content of experience may be very, very false, and yet it feels extremely true in the moment. So to a large extent, that's why I actually, consider a priority logical and strong philosophical arguments, as we will see. I will also add that it's actually quite fascinating that this view has recently been also found an interesting intersection in these other areas such as ethics and effective altruism and the hedonistic imperative, which is something that I care a lot about. Basically this idea of eliminating suffering being a really important goal that to a large extent actually becomes very, very urgent and obvious of a goal once you start identifying with consciousness as a whole. That it's not actually only the suffering that you will experience in your own body that matters, but also the suffering that other sentient beings will experience, because they are you in a very deep level. And if you're rational at all, you should care about that too. And in a sense, like it also has like all sorts of interesting ethical applications. And we will go a little bit into more depth on them. But that's it for now. Thank you so much.